Well, joining us on the phone right now is a good friend and someone that really needs no introduction. That is Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, who's been taking such a lead on so many issues, especially issues of national security. I've appreciated Senator Graham's comments over the years. We're friends. We've worked together on a number of issues. But, Senator, I am probably as concerned as I've ever been when I see the nomination of not just Chuck Hagel here to be the head of the new Secretary of Defense, but also the nomination of John Brennan with regard to the CIA. And I want to start, if we can, first with the situation with the Department of Defense and Chuck Hagel statements on Israel. Obviously, he's going to have a hearing. What's your sense, first of all, on the nomination, and what do you think the president is thinking here?
Well, I don't know what the president's thinking, but he Chuck Hagel, it's not a personal thing. I've known Chuck for a long time. I like him and his wife, but we've got such different views of the world. And to your listeners, elections matter. Jay, you've been actually a really, really good friend to Lindsey Graham, talking about elections have consequences, the gang of 14, having the long view of things. So I expect a president to nominate somebody different than I would, like a Jack Lew for Secretary of Treasury. But here's the problem I have with Chuck Hagel. He is on an island almost by himself when it comes to Iran. He was one of two senators who voted against sanctioning the Iranians, saying we should negotiate with them, sanctions wouldn't work. He said we went to Iraq for the oil, the surge would work. He refused to designate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist group, Hezbollah. He wouldn't sign a letter saying they're a terrorist group. He's urged the Israelis to negotiate directly with Hamas, a terrorist organization trying to kill Israeli children. His views on Iraq, I thought, were really completely off base, and he wants to take the military below levels I think are wise and prudent. So I've got real concerns that this is not leading from behind. This is not leading at all.
I should mention in the introduction here in our initial comments that Senator Graham, in addition to being a United States Senator, is a colonel in the United States Air Force and is actually a senior instructor at the Air Force JAG School. Let me follow it up with this question and my concern here. We have an office in Jerusalem, Senator, that's staffed by people with a lot of years of government affairs experience, but also our senior lawyer there is in the reserves of the Israeli Defense Force. He is a judge advocate general himself in charge of the International Law Group, primarily dealing with Gaza and with the West Bank. They're very concerned with the Chuck Hagel nomination on what it means for Israel. Yeah, I get the sense, Senator Graham, that the president is nominating someone that shares a philosophy that the president agrees with. It'd be unusual for him to appoint someone that doesn't. You've said this is very troubling for Israel. Could you explain a little bit more on that? What does a Chuck Hagel Secretary of Defense mean for Israel, especially with the situation with Iran?
Well, the next Secretary of Defense is dealing with an Iranian regime that I think is hell-bent on getting nuclear weapons, which will throw the whole Mideast into chaos. So why are we having a debate about the most antagonistic person toward Israel in the Senate? I can't think of votes more in your face to Israel than refusing to sanction Iran, who wants to destroy Israel, refusing to designate the Revolutionary Guard in Iran as a terrorist organization, suggesting the Israeli government directly negotiate with Hamas. So if I was Israel, I'd be very worried about this nomination. And if I was Iran, I'd be encouraged that the Obama administration's taken a new course vis-a-vis Iran. It's exactly the wrong debate to have at a very critical time in world history.
Let me ask you one more question on this, and I know Jordan's got some questions also on the Brennan nomination, and I'll have a follow-up on a couple of those. But you're going to give him a fair hearing. There's going to be real questions asked. There have been some Democratic colleagues of yours, I mean, these are obviously a different party, that have raised some serious concern about this nomination of Chuck Hagel as well. So when you put this all together, I'm trying to figure out the political calculation here for this kind of nomination, which obviously has the Israelis concerned. I mean, we've talked to government officials there. They're trying to be silent, of course, but the reality is what you're reading between the lines is there's concern. Now, you've seen that in some of the papers. What's the political calculation here? Does the president want this kind of fight?
Apparently he does. And here's the way I see the nomination unfolding. Senator Hagel served with distinction in Vietnam. He's a brave man. He received 2 Purple Hearts. He's truly a warrior. But I think he has a view of Vietnam that's colored his worldview. Iraq and Afghanistan and the war on terror, it's not a Cold War, it's a hot war. It's not a civil war between 2 groups of people. It really is an international existential threat to Israel and our way of life. And I don't think, quite frankly, he understands that. If he did, he wouldn't be saying, that Iran's misunderstood. So a lot of Democrats are going to have to wrestle with his approach to Israel and Iran. because there are a lot of pro-Israel Democrats in the United States Senate. And again, I like Hagel. He served with distinction in Vietnam, but his policy positions vis-a-vis Israel and Iran are so out of the mainstream. He says he wants to clarify his positions, that he's a very pro-Israel senator. I am interested in hearing what he says and how he clarifies these positions. I'm very interested, quite frankly, in seeing how a Democrat would justify their support for Israel in light of some of the things he said.
Yeah.
To talk about the CIA as well, because Senator Graham, you've led on the Benghazi issue and trying to get answers there, and you've said about the John Brennan's nomination, he's currently the U.S. Homeland Security Advisor, and he runs the National Counterterrorism Center. He's been controversial for some statements made in the past about terrorism and defeating terrorism, and can you say Islamic in front of radical, things like that, making these distinctions. But the bigger picture issue, and I know I've read everything and seen you, is that you want answers on Benghazi before moving forward on anyone that gets to become, the next head of the CIA.
I can't believe the American media has just basically laid down on this issue. Thank God for Fox and a few people in other media organizations. You had a story told about Benghazi 3 weeks before the election that tried to continue the narrative that al-Qaeda had been decimated and the consulate was well secured, strong, substantially, significantly secured. Well, the report from the State Department and just common sense tells you it was not strongly secured. Al-Qaeda has not been decimated. And who changed the talking points given to Susan Rice? We still don't know. At one time we were told the Director of National Intelligence. The next day we were told it was the FBI. Then it was the CIA. Somebody took the al-Qaeda references out of those talking points, I believe, because it would undercut the narrative that al-Qaeda had been decimated, and if they were in fact involved in Libya, it would be bad for the administration. So I want to know, before we confirm the new CIA director, who changed the talking points. I want to know who the survivors are so they can be interviewed to make it pretty clear to anybody that there was never a riot. It was always a terrorist attack. And it's not against Brennan per se, but when Brennan was in the Bush administration, he said one thing about interrogation techniques. I think he's got a lot of questions to answer. Time will tell.
Well, Senator Graham, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us. You do a fantastic job for the folks of South Carolina, but you're really doing a fantastic job for all of us that are concerned about our country and the direction of our country. And I want to personally say, one lawyer to another, I'm glad you're the lawyer on our team, and I appreciate what you're doing on this. And, of course, we'll be following this closely. And thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it, Senator.
Thanks for being somebody reasoned and understanding the law and keeping your listeners informed about things that are not nearly talked enough about. If it weren't for shows like yours, I don't know if we'd get half this stuff out. So God bless. Have a good New Year.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Now, we've heard from almost 100,000 people, literally, folks, in about 3 days. Over 75,000 online alone, and that's growing as